It's a whole industry. These are the tools of a maritime culture. We can't conceive of how gigantic this industry is.
Welcome to SeaClass. My name is Crystal Rose, and I'm the Curator of Collections here at Mystic Seaport Museum. And we are here with Mike Dyer, who is our Curator of Maritime History and expert in all things whaling. So we're actually going to be talking today about whalecraft and harpoons and all types of different
Weapons.
weaponry
Weapons, essentially.
that you would have had with you on a whaling voyage. So we're going to start, I think, first probably with harpoons.
Yeah, sure.
And
That's
let's
a good
take
place
a look.
to start.
Yeah, and I'm interested, Mike, if you can talk a little bit about the evolution of harpoons. And I'm happy to hand some up to you here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. You know, it really is interesting, Crystal, because as you look at these are harpoons. These barbed things, right? So,
Right.
So they're, you know.
They're the head of the harpoon, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a barb, right?
Yep.
You would expect that to hold fast when you use it. And yet, as you look at these 6 pieces, they don't look all that different.
Right.
The only parts that are different, really, are the heads of them. And other than that, they're pretty much the same. And yet, the piece that you're holding is called a two-flute iron. So what a harpoon is simply the mechanism by which the line
attaches to the whale.
To the whale.
Right. This
So
is connecting you by line to the whale.
You're going to get fast. And, you know, harpoons are made of iron, malleable iron. So this shaft, you know, is made to bend, right? It's supposed to bend, and the barbs at the front, you know, would be razor sharp, and this, you know, they have this, you know, this barb mechanism, which theoretically, when it sticks into the blubber, it'll stay there theoretically.
Yeah. Right. That doesn't actually work that way.
Right.
Sometimes,
exactly. And this is a very ancient European design.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
know, this goes way back to you know, Basque whaling.
Right.
You know, in the 15th century, this design, this
Sure.
European design, and it kind of worked.
Yeah.
You know, it worked for bowhead whaling, but it didn't work that well for sperm whaling in the
whales.
open ocean.
Yeah.
And so you needed a different kind of a harpoon.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what would you?
Well, the next one in the evolution.
Yeah. Is the
You know, these are cool because
single flute?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's hard to imagine all that. That rope, that line would be we'll see one over here on these mounted irons. Just simply jams up against that socket.
Yep.
Right. And it's tension.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the head of that?
You know, it looks a little bit sharper to me.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would hold a little bit better.
Well, that was the hope.
The hope,
was that the
yeah.
shaft would be a little thinner,
Yep.
and a little longer, and that it would absolutely
would
bend.
stick. Yeah,
So
okay.
it would bend, and that single harpoon tip, that single flue, would dig into the blubber. So you know, the whale's blubber.
It's quite thick.
Yeah, it's about, you know, in a sperm whale it could be 8 inches, you know, 10 inches thick, and it's tendinous, right? So it's not like fat.
Right. It's not like gel or anything. It actually, you can hold it to it.
It has tendinous qualities to it. So if you can get that harpoon under the blubber,
Yeah.
between the musculature and that blubber layer,
The layer.
it'll stay.
It'll stay.
It'll stick.
Okay.
But
Gotcha.
even so, they still found that under the pressure of towing the whale, the harpoons would come out. And so they needed another kind of a harpoon.
All right. So we gotta.
Yeah. And there were many different, oh my heavens, there were so many different attempts to do this.
See this one.
There were so many different people out there trying so many different patent harpoons of various kinds. And finally, Lewis Temple in New Bedford. Lewis Temple was a blacksmith down on the waterfront in New Bedford. He was Some say he was born enslaved in Virginia,
yeah.
but there's no actual proof of that. One way or the other, he was a man of color. He was a black man, highly skilled blacksmith on the New Bedford waterfront, and he invented this toggle.
Yeah.
So there it is,
Yeah.
and that is the toggle type.
Right.
Right. So this barb part is sandwiched between two parts of the outer part of the harpoon, and there would be that little hole there.
Yep.
See that little
Oh,
hole?
that's right. This is where the pen would go.
Yeah. So there would be just a little piece of wood in there, a little toothpick in there.
Yep.
And that would hold the barb in place, and then it would pop open. Right.
And this seems like it would stay a lot better.
Oh heavens, yes!
In that layer.
It made a huge difference, and this kind of technology had been figured out by indigenous whalers in the Arctic and on the Northwest coast and elsewhere in the world, 2,000 years ago. It's a completely different type of a hunt. Yankee whaling, European whaling was a commercial hunt, whereas indigenous whaling is a subsistence hunt, and so these folks relied for their livelihood, for their very lives, on the ability of those harpoons to work. So this didn't happen until.
And those would have been bone, right? Those have been bone harpoons.
Bone, mussel shell sometimes.
Yeah.
This didn't happen until 1849.
Yeah. Wow. So what I actually see, there's like some writing on this one.
Yeah.
What's the writing mean? And it looks stamped over here, and then written over here. I can see BK.
Yeah.
Bark.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the bark lark.
LK, yeah.
Right? Yeah, BKLK.
Yep.
Yep. And then what about the little
So the
stamp
maker,
here?
right?
That's
So,
the maker.
Yep. In that case, I haven't identified who that particular maker is. Some of these irons, do have maker's marks on them that you can discern the maker. It'll be a JD, James Driggs, or D&D,
which is our the shipsmith we have here, which is actually from New Bedford.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but that identifies that, and that's generally actually something that has been stamped by the maker.
Yeah, this one's stamped, and the other one's
Right.
into carved in. Yeah.
But then this other information, you can see that it was punched with a metal punch and then scraped. Information, bark, lark, or, as it might be on this, on another iron, this one says bark CWM. So this is the bark Charles W. Morgan, and it'll say LB for the larboard boat.
The larboard boat, yep.
All right, what that means is that the classic phrase in whaling, and this had the force of law behind it, craft claims the whale. So if there was ever a dispute on the whaling grounds between vessels, the harpoon, the marked iron that's in the whale, identifies whose whale it is.
Yeah. What if there were multiple? Did that ever happen?
It does, and at that point, then there's a lot of discussion back and forth, and then sometimes what would happen would be that if it's a sperm whale, it could go to court, or one vessel could get the head, and the other vessel could get the body.
Wow.
And so one vessel would get the raw spermaceti out of the head of the whale, and one vessel would get the body, the oil from the blubber.
Yeah.
And so, but there were court cases, absolutely,
Yeah.
and that identification has the force of law.
Yeah, and you mentioned too, like the particular whaling boat, right, that used that harpoon.
Yeah.
This may be a silly question, but was there ever any competition between
Sure.
the different boats, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you could get a bounty, on some voyages, depending on how, who spotted the whale in the first place.
Right.
You could get a little bit of a bounty.
Because it's marked in all the logbooks too. Usually they always mark, who took that particular whale.
And very often you'll see also in journals and logbooks, there'll be a list in the back, and it'll say larboard boat, and then there'll be a list of the number of whales taken, starboard boat,
Right.
And there's people's lives and careers are associated with this too. So the harpooner and the boat header, You know, the boat header is an officer on shipboard, one of the mates, and then the harpooner is the boat steerer, and he's kind of a petty officer. He's not he's neither fish nor fowl. He's not a sailor in the forecastle, but he's not an officer.
Right. He has a specialized skill.
He's a specialized skill. That's right. Yep, and generally an excellent whaleman.
Yeah.
But that being said, if the boat steerer failed enough times, he could be sent down. So he could be busted and sent back down, because that's the name of the game is, you know, and the thing about these harpoons, and we're going to get to it with this tool here in a little bit, is that in order to get fast to a whale, you have to put that boat right up on wood to black skin was the phrase. There's so many phrases in whaling. You know, wood to black skin was one of them.
Yeah.
You put that boat right up under the whale, and then the boat steerer has to stand up with his harpoon, stick that harpoon, and then grab a second harpoon and stick the second one in. So you want to get fast with 2 irons.
How hard was that to do?
It's impossible. I mean, these guys are Superman.
They're huge. Yeah, I mean, do you also have to be kind of quiet getting up to them?
But you have to be quiet, you have to be fast, you have to be strong, you have to be fearless.
Right.
All of that.
Because most of the time they're bigger than the whaleboat, right? I mean.
A lot of times, sure. I mean, you know, if you see, you know, if you were looking through a logbook and you see an 80-barrel sperm whale.
Yesterday I saw 210-barrel sperm whales.
Yeah, those animals.
Are big. Those are huge animals.
They're approaching 80 feet and 80 feet long, and a whaleboat, of course, is 30 feet long.
Yeah.
So
you have to be really brave. A lot of adrenaline.
You know, this opens up a different part of the conversation. Some of those very, very large whales. Recent research has discovered that the very largest whales were often had arthritis. That nitrogen had built up in their bones over their long lives, and
so they were slower.
And they were slower and less agile than like a 40-barrel bull.
Yeah.
You know, a young male in its prime, a 40-barrel bull, which was a dangerous animal to hunt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that really, really big ones, sometimes they couldn't get around quite so good.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. So what should we look at next? What makes sense to look at in the evolution of?
I don't know. We could talk a bit about these mounted irons. I mean, they're very interesting. Get that bent one, yeah.
This one? This is the bent one.
Yeah, that one that's a little bit bent, because when we were talking earlier, Crystal, we were talking about having 2 irons, but then we were also talking about this socket system, right? And the way that this line jams up to the socket. See, it's just simply it's simply a splice. And that is what holds. This is what attaches the whale line to the harpoon, which is attached to the whale. Right there it is.
There's no super glue in this.
No, no glue, no. But you'll notice that there's marline on the socket there. Which again just creates that tension. But the handle of a harpoon.
Yeah. Tell me about the wood.
Well, this particular. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, that looks like this is a worked piece of hardwood, but look at it. It's all knotty and sort of dumb looking. And that's fine. Because the handle of a harpoon is disposable.
Okay.
If these lines all snap off and you lose the handle, it doesn't matter. This is the important part. There are some other tools that we'll look at here by and by, which are not that way, like where the handle.
The handle is important.
Is important. Well, it's important here too. It's really important. It's a piece of hardwood. It can't break. It has hickory, white oak. Some really great piece of tough hardwood has to get the harpoon. But see how this is a little bit bent.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
Well, this was in a whale. This was in a whale once upon a time.
Yeah.
So this was probably a second iron, and it came off the larboard boat of the. Charles W. Morgan. So we've got great Charles W. Morgan harpoon collection. How about that?
Yeah.
That's great stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, it's even a little
really
loose there. There we go. All right. Should we look at the other one?
Sure.
Is that one? Whoa, this one looks like it's still got like the bark on it from the tree. Let's take a look.
It does still have the bark on it.
It does still have the bark.
And that's a piece of hickory too. Look at that.
Yeah.
So that's tough stuff. And this is starboard bow boat. So this would have been,
SBB.
yeah, exactly, SBB.
Oh, Charles W.
Yeah,
Morgan.
from the Charles W. Morgan.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a large instrument.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. And again, you know, it wouldn't be, seldom would these harpoons be tossed.
Right. Right.
You got it. The idea is to get fast, you know.
It's about accuracy.
You've got to plant that harpoon. You plant it in the whale, and then that one's a rusted shut.
Yeah, a little rusty, but we get the picture.
And this, of course, is what they call.
Oh, this is a modified toggle?
That's a standard toggle, and that would have been, you know, after 1870. These were, you know, by the early 20th century.
This is like a modified version of the temple toggle from earlier.
Yep, and these were cast.
Yes. Okay.
So this
instead of
this
being
part
worked, these are
was cast. It wasn't wrought.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that the shaft goes inside the head, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Very cool.
So this.
So you want to tell us a little bit about?
Well, let's see. Let's get a darting gun iron.
Yep.
So there you go. There's a darting gun iron.
Yep.
Go ahead and fit that into its proper place. All right. So there's the harpoon. And then then there's this. This is a brass bomb. This would have been filled with black powder. And that goes into the, you know.
Yep.
And there's a trigger mechanism missing on this example, but you can see that metal rod on the example sitting on the.
Oh yeah.
You see that metal rod?
I can see the metal rod.
And that
on
metal
one,
rod would extend
from
about out
here?
to here, and that goes to a trigger mechanism, which when this thing was planted, when that harpoon is planted, it would hopefully be planted far enough to trigger
the activation.
And then the bomb would be fired directly, directly into the body of the animal, and then the harpoon would come loose.
Was there anything else attaching that, or just
the rope?
Like that? The rope.
Yep. And you can see, like on this one, this is a really cool one. It's been, it's been served with marline around there, right?
Yeah.
So that just give that extra tension. Give that extra tension to the rope that as it's attached, and then this weapon would go right back in the whaleboat. These are still made, sold, and used. So Arctic indigenous whalers still use
these.
Yep, they still use them. This was invented in, I guess it was Ebenezer Pierce in New Bedford in about 1868, I think was the first patent.
Yeah.
And they just stayed in use ever since.
So what is left for us to talk about? We've got the lance over here. This really long.
Yep. I think the lance is probably it's a really important tool to talk about.
Yeah. Let's pick this guy up. All right. What are we looking at?
Well, there's a bunch of things about this. For one thing, the tip. This was a A.J. Peters of Fairhaven, so this is a 20th century thing. What do you notice the difference between this tip and a harpoon?
Well, I mean, this is a flat. This looks maybe like it could be sharper. I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's razor sharp.
Yeah.
But it's also made to go in and come back out.
Yeah, it's much longer.
In and come back out, right? So it's not meant like a harpoon to go in and stay in. And again, this is malleable iron, so it's meant to bend, and they did. There'd be 3 or 4 of these in each boat. And what's interesting about this, again, we can feed
It's
it.
held together. Yep.
Look at the very end at that loop coming out of the very end.
Yeah.
So that means that after this lance has been stuck into the animal, you can pull it back out again. Right?
Yeah.
So there'll be a lance warp, a piece of rope attached to that knot, which is attached to the boat itself, and you can pull it back out and use it again. This was the tool to ultimately dispatch your prey.
Right. So I have another question, Mike. Would any of these tools have been made on board? Were they all made beforehand? And the whale ship was outfitted with all of these things. What happened if you lost tools? Like, what do you do?
There would be blacksmiths and shipsmiths in New London, in Nantucket, in New Bedford, in Fairhaven, in Westport, Bristol. These were people who knew how to make these tools, and they made them by the thousands. Yeah. So it's not like a couple of harpoons on a whaling voyage.
How many might you have taken with you?
You could take 100.
Yeah.
You'd take 50 double flute irons, you'd take 50 single flute irons, and then you'd take another 25 toggle irons once they had been invented. So when you're outfitting for a whaling voyage, you take hundreds of these things along.
Yeah.
Because they were lost all the time, and sometimes they broke, sometimes they failed, and they were lost all the time. Irons would draw, whales would get away, and it's just the nature of this particular kind of a hunt.
Yeah.
Which is completely monstrous. I mean, it's just big, and the animals are big, and the
tools
investment
are big. Yeah,
is big,
everything is
and
big.
the iron is strong and has to be made just exactly so by professional people who knew what they were doing, and so that's kind of the nature of it. And as far as maintaining these weapons on shipboard. They had to be mounted properly. So, for instance, these harpoons would, you'd take your iron out of a barrel full of irons. You'd take the iron out. You'd select some piece of wood from a big stack of harpoon handles that some guy had cut in the woods and sold by the barrel full to the whalers in New Bedford.
Right.
He went out and he cut hickory trees and he cut white oak trees and he stuffed them in a barrel.
Yeah.
And you buy a whole barrel full of handles.
Yeah.
And you
and
find
you
a
put
handle.
these two together. Yeah.
And you put the handle to the iron, and then you would take your 3/4 inch whale line. So that's Manila, and that stuff was made. That is some of the finest rope ever made. Out of natural fiber, and you would attach a length of it to the windlass, and you'd prop up your harpoon, iron, and handle, and then you take that rope, tie your hitch, and you would crank it on the windlass until it was taut, and then strap it to the handle itself, and then that harpoon was almost ready to go. Before the boats were actually outfitted to lower, they'd break out the grinding stone, and you'd grind those edges on the harpoons razor sharp. You'd grind the edges of your lances razor sharp, so that there was no doubt that it was going to penetrate the blubber, it was going to penetrate the musculature, it was going to do its job.
Yeah.
And so that you do that every time you had to lower the boat. So it was the boat header, not the officer so much, as the boat steerer, not the header so much. His responsibility was making sure that all of this gear was in
ready.
top-notch condition and ready to go. Yeah. We haven't talked about the line and the line tubs, but the line was equally important.
Right.
And that line would come in a coil.
Right.
And you'd uncoil it and throw it overboard and drag it along behind the ship until all the kinks were out of it. And then you would take that line and you'd run it up to the top of the masthead and lower it down, and you'd lower it in Flemish coils into the tub. So if you just pull on it just a little bit, that whole tub will empty of line. Yeah. And so you sit those tubs in the boat, and you run the line around the loggerhead, and you run it up through, and you would tie off your harpoons, your primary iron and your second iron, and yet they're all ready to go. So when it's stand up and give it to them, you drop your oar, grab your turn around, grab your harpoon, stick it into the animal, grab the second one, do it again, and
then what happens?
Get out of the way.
Yeah, then what happens?
Because if depending on the personality of the animal that
Yeah.
you just
You might
stuck
go
a
on a sleigh
harpoon
ride
into,
there, yeah.
you could take off, you could dive, you could jump up in the air, any number of things could
Yeah.
happen. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you have to pay very close attention to what you're doing.
Yeah. Mike, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge on all of this whale craft with us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of SeaClass.